The gentle hum of conversation was a warm blanket over the garden. Sunlight, soft and golden, filtered through the ancient oak trees, dappling the white chairs and the smiling faces of our friends and family. Every detail was perfect, just as Emily had imagined it. The scent of roses and freshly cut grass hung in the air, a perfume of new beginnings. I stood at the altar, my heart a drum beating a rhythm of nervous joy, watching my whole world walk down the aisle. Not the world I had lost, but the one I was building from the ashes. My son Leo stood beside me, his small hand tucked tightly in mine. He was my best man, a serious title for a 6-year-old, but he wore it with a solemn pride that both broke my heart and stitched it back together. In his tiny tuxedo, he was a perfect miniature of me, right down to the unruly curl of his dark hair. His eyes, however, were not mine. They were his mother's, Sarah's, the same deep, thoughtful brown that could see right into your soul. As Emily approached, a vision in ivory, the crowd's quiet murmurs faded into a collective, hushed awe. She was beautiful, not in a fragile, distant way, but with a warmth that radiated from her, a light that had guided me through my darkest years. Her smile wasn't just for me. It was for Leo, too. When her eyes met his, a special kind of love flowed between them, a bond forged not by blood, but by patience, kindness, and countless bedtime stories. I squeezed Leo's hand. "You see, buddy? Isn't she beautiful?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on her. "Yeah," he whispered. "She looks like a queen." My throat tightened. A lump formed, one I had become familiar with over the years. It was the bittersweet ache of a beautiful moment overlapping with a painful memory. Sarah should have been here. Not as the bride, of course, but as a witness. A proud mother seeing her son so dapper and grown. She would have loved Emily. She would have seen the goodness in her, the steady, unwavering love she offered not just to me, but to the most precious part of her life she had to leave behind. The music swelled and then softened as Emily reached the altar. She handed her bouquet to her sister, then turned to face me. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were glistening with unshed tears. She reached out and her hand found mine, our fingers intertwining, a silent promise before the spoken ones. Then she knelt slightly, her gown rustling, so she was at eye level with Leo. "Hi, my handsome little man," she said, her voice soft. "Are you ready for this?" Leo gave a shy, toothy grin. "I'm your best man, Emily." "The best man," she corrected, tapping his nose gently. He giggled, the sound a bright, happy melody that momentarily chased away the shadows in the corner of my heart. Emily stood up, her gaze locking with mine again. The officiant began to speak, his words a familiar, comforting cadence about love, commitment, and the journey of two souls. I felt lost in the moment, in the impossible reality that I had been given a second chance at this kind of happiness. My past was a part of me, a landscape of love and loss that had shaped who I was, but Emily was my future. She was the one who had taught me that a heart could break and still learn to love again, perhaps even more deeply. The officiant turned to me. "David, do you take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?" I had rehearsed this. I had said the words 1,000 times in my head. "I do," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected. The words felt real, solid, a foundation. Then it was Emily's turn. Her voice was a little shaky, filled with an emotion that resonated through everyone present. "I, Emily, take you, David," she began, her eyes holding mine, "to be my husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, in sickness and in health." It was in that sacred pause, in that breath between promises, that Leo's small voice cut through the reverent silence. It wasn't loud or disruptive. It was a simple, innocent question, spoken with the genuine curiosity of a child trying to make sense of the world. He tugged on my trousers and I glanced down. He was looking at the front row where Emily's parents sat beside an empty chair we had reserved, a symbolic space for those who couldn't be with us. Then he looked back at me, his brow furrowed with confusion. "Daddy?" he asked, his voice now seeming to echo in the sudden, profound quiet. "Why isn't Mommy sitting with us?" Time stopped. The gentle breeze died. The birds seemed to fall silent. Every eye in that garden, which had been fixed on the bride and groom, now darted between the innocent face of my son and the woman at the altar. And Emily, she froze. Mid-vow. Her lips were parted. The next word of her promise caught in her throat. The light in her eyes flickered, replaced by a complex storm of emotions I couldn't immediately decipher. Shock, pain, compassion. Her hand, which was holding mine, went rigid, The beautiful, perfect moment shattered into a million pieces, and all that was left was the raw, unanswered question hanging in the air, and the ghost of the woman my son still called Mommy. To understand the weight of that single childish question, you have to understand Sarah. She wasn't just a memory. She was an architect. The architect of my manhood, of our home, of the very best parts of my son. Her laughter wasn't a sound. It was a force of nature that could banish shadows from any room. She had a way of making the mundane magical. A Tuesday night could feel like a celebration, a trip to the grocery store an adventure. When Leo was born, that magic intensified, focused into a beam of pure, unconditional love. She would build forts out of blankets and chairs, creating entire galaxies for him to explore. She'd lie on the grass with him for hours, finding dragons and castles in the clouds. Her love for him was fierce, protective, and boundless. "He has your steady hands, David," she'd tell me, watching Leo meticulously stack his wooden blocks. "But he has my dreamer's heart." She was right. He was the perfect fusion of us. Then, the universe, in its cruel indifference, decided the architect had to leave the house she was building. It was a car accident. A drunk driver on a rainy night. The call came, and the world I knew simply ceased to exist. It was replaced by a sterile white hospital room, the rhythmic, heartless beep of machines, and a silence that was louder than any scream. I held her hand, cold and unresponsive, and made a promise that I would keep her memory alive for our son, that he would always know the magnificent woman who gave him life. Explaining it to a 3-year-old was the cruelest task I have ever faced. How do you explain forever to someone who has just begun to understand the concept of tomorrow? "Mommy's a star now," I'd say, pointing to the night sky, my voice thick with unshed tears. "She's the brightest one, watching over us." For a while, every night, Leo would wave at the sky before bed. "Good night, Mommy Star." The years that followed are a blur of grief, a thick, suffocating fog. We weren't living, we were just getting through. I threw myself into being both parents, a frantic, desperate attempt to fill a void that was infinite. I was a ship without a rudder, drifting in a sea of loss. My only anchor, the small boy who needed me to be strong. But I was crumbling. The laughter was gone from our home. The blanket forts were packed away. We were two ghosts haunting the rooms where Sarah's light once shone so brightly. I met Emily 2 years later. It was nothing dramatic, no bolt of lightning. It was quiet, unassuming. I was at a local coffee shop trying to work, while Leo was at a friend's birthday party. The place was crowded, and a woman asked if she could share my table. She had kind eyes and a stack of books she was grading. She was a first-grade teacher. We barely spoke at first, just polite nods. But then she noticed a drawing sticking out of my laptop bag. It was one of Leo's, a green and purple monster with 7 eyes. "I love that," she said, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "The color choice is very bold. You have a talented little artist." That was the key. She saw him, and through him, she saw me. Not as the tragic widower everyone in town knew me as, but just as a father. We started talking. It was easy, natural. I told her about Leo, and for the first time in years, I found myself talking about Sarah without a crippling weight on my chest. I spoke of her magic, her laughter. Emily listened. She didn't offer pity or platitudes. She just listened, with a compassion that felt like a warm cup of tea on a cold day. Our friendship grew slowly, cautiously. She understood my hesitation. She knew my heart was a fractured thing, and she never pushed. She became a friend first. She'd ask about Leo's day. She remembered the name of his favorite dinosaur. One afternoon, Leo was with me when we ran into her. He was shy, hiding behind my legs as he often did with new people. Emily didn't rush him. She knelt down and talked to the stuffed bear he was clutching. "That's a very brave bear you have there," she said softly. "He looks like a great protector." Leo, his face full of wonder, peeked out. "His name is Captain Snuggles," he whispered. That was the beginning of their bond. She never tried to be Mommy. She never tried to fill Sarah's shoes. She knew they were impossible to fill. Instead, she brought her own shoes. She walked beside us at our pace. She taught Leo how to bake cookies, something Sarah, an infamous disaster in the kitchen, had never done. They would spend hours in the garden, planting flowers, their hands covered in dirt. She brought her own kind of magic back into our home. It wasn't the boisterous, galaxy-building magic of Sarah. It was a quieter, steadier magic. The magic of patience. The magic of showing up day after day. The day I knew I loved her was about a year into our relationship. I came home to find her and Leo sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums. My heart stopped. I was terrified. But they weren't sad. Emily was pointing to a picture of Sarah, radiant on our wedding day. "She was so beautiful, wasn't she?" Emily said to Leo. "Your daddy told me she had the best smile." Leo nodded, his finger tracing his mother's face on the glossy paper. "She's a star now," he said. "She is," Emily agreed, her voice gentle. "And she is so, so proud of the amazing boy you are." She wasn't trying to erase the past. She was helping us honor it. She was helping us build a bridge from what we had lost to what we could become. She was showing my son and me that it was okay to love again, that a new love didn't diminish the old one. It simply made the heart bigger. It was then I knew that this woman, this kind, patient, wonderful woman, was not a replacement. She was a gift. A second chance I never thought I deserved. And asking her to be my wife felt like the most natural, right thing I had ever done. The silence that followed Leo's question was not empty. It was filled with 1,000 unsaid things. The collective gasp of our guests, the sharp intake of breath from Emily's mother in the front row, the sudden, frantic chirping of a bird in the oak tree above, as if nature itself was trying to fill the void. To me, it felt like the air had turned to glass. I was terrified to move, to breathe, for fear of shattering everything. My first instinct was purely protective. I wanted to scoop Leo up, cover his ears, and whisk him away from the sea of staring eyes. I wanted to shield him from a reality he was too young to fully comprehend, that his innocent question had landed like a stone in the calm waters of this carefully constructed day. His gaze was still fixed on me, his brown eyes wide and earnest. He wasn't being malicious or disruptive. He was simply a child, thinking aloud, trying to connect the dots of his fragmented family picture. He knew Mommy was a star, but in the logic of a 6-year-old, a wedding was a place where everyone you loved was supposed to be. And for him, that list would always include Sarah. I looked from my son's confused face to Emily, and what I saw in hers made my heart ache with a new and different kind of pain. The joyful, teary-eyed bride from moments before was gone. In her place was a woman suspended in an impossible moment. Her hand was still in mine, but it felt distant, cold. Her face was pale, and the smile she had held just for me had vanished. Her eyes, those clear blue pools of warmth and light, were now a storm of conflicting emotions. I saw the shock, the raw, visceral impact of the word "mommy" striking her at the altar. I saw the hurt, a flicker of pain that any woman in that specific moment would feel. The sudden, stark reminder that she was not the first, that a ghost stood between us. But beneath that, and this is the part that defines the woman I love, I saw something else rise to the surface, an overwhelming wave of compassion. Her gaze shifted from me to Leo, and the hardness in her expression softened. The pain was still there, but it was being eclipsed by a deep, aching empathy for the small boy who missed his mother. I could see the frantic thoughts racing behind her eyes. What do I do? What do I say? The officiant, a kind man who had known my family for years, looked helplessly between us, his mouth slightly agape, the ceremony completely derailed. Guests were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, their whispers a low, anxious hum. Some looked at Leo with pity, others with a kind of pained sympathy. A few shot glances at Emily, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. This was every second wife's nightmare, a moment so brutally public, so intensely personal. My mind raced. Should I speak? Should I answer him? Saying, "Mommy is in heaven, remember?" felt harsh and dismissive in this context. It would shut him down, make him feel ashamed for asking, and that was the last thing I ever wanted. I needed to handle this with a gentleness that the public setting made nearly impossible. I was frozen, trapped between protecting my son's heart and protecting my bride's. It felt like an eternity, but it could only have been 10 or 15 seconds. Emily's grip on my hand tightened, a silent signal. She took a slow, deliberate breath, pulling the air back into her lungs. It was a visible act of centering herself, of pushing past her own shock to take control of the shattered moment. She did not look to me for a rescue. She did not look to the officiant. She held the gaze of my son. Slowly, gracefully, she released my hand. The entire garden seemed to lean in, holding its breath. With a quiet rustle of her beautiful ivory gown, she did the last thing anyone expected. She knelt down. Right there, at the altar, in the middle of her vows, she lowered herself until she was once again at eye level with the small child who had, with a single question, brought our past roaring into our present. She put her hands on his little shoulders, her touch gentle and reassuring. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the three of us, enclosed in a bubble of fragile, intense emotion. The guests, the music, the sunshine, it all faded into the background. It was just me, the son I had with the woman I'd lost, and the woman who was offering to build a new world with us. And as she prepared to speak, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that her next words would define not only the rest of the ceremony, but the rest of our lives. Emily looked directly into Leo's eyes, her gaze a shield against the silent, watching crowd. Her voice when she spoke was not a whisper, but it was soft, clear, and imbued with a warmth that felt like it was meant only for him. "You're right, sweetheart," she began, her tone steady and impossibly gentle. "Your mommy should be here. On a day this big, all the people we love the most should be sitting right in the front row watching us." Leo's worried expression eased just slightly, replaced by a flicker of understanding. He felt heard. He felt seen. Emily continued, her thumb stroking his small shoulder in a soothing rhythm. "And she is watching. You and I, we've talked about this before, haven't we? How she is the brightest star in the sky at night. Well, today, she is the brightest sunshine. She is in the light that's warming your face right now. She is in the gentle breeze that's rustling the leaves on these big old trees. She is here, Leo. She's all around us." She paused, letting the beautiful words sink in. My own eyes were burning, tears threatening to spill over. Across the way, I saw Sarah's mother, my former mother-in-law, bring a white handkerchief to her eyes, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But looking at her, I knew they weren't just tears of grief. There was gratitude mixed in, a profound relief. Then Emily did the thing that would forever define her in my heart. She smiled, a small, sad, yet incredibly beautiful smile. "But I think I know why she doesn't have a chair," she said, as if sharing a sacred secret with him. "It's because she isn't a guest, Leo. She's not here to just watch. She's inside your heart. She has the most important seat in the whole world. And that means she's standing right up here with us, right now, right next to you." She leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. "She's helping you be so brave for your daddy, and she's helping me be brave too. So when you see me smiling at your daddy in a minute, you can know she's smiling with us. When you see us holding hands, she's holding our hands too. She's not sitting down there because her job today is too big. Her job is to be the love that we all feel." Leo's face, which had been a canvas of 6-year-old confusion, transformed. A slow, wondrous dawn of comprehension spread across his features. It wasn't the complex logic of an adult, but the pure, accepting wisdom of a child's heart. He looked from Emily's earnest face to mine, and then glanced at the symbolic empty chair in the front row. He seemed to finally understand. He nodded slowly. "She's the love," he repeated softly, the words a quiet revelation. "That's right, my love," Emily whispered. Then, with a grace that took my breath away, she stood up. She took my hand again, and her grip was no longer cold or rigid. It was warm, firm, and full of a strength that humbled me. She turned her tear-streaked, smiling face back to the officiant. "Please," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Continue." A collective sigh of relief and quiet admiration rippled through the garden. The officiant, his own eyes misty, cleared his throat and smiled, not just with his lips, but with his entire being. He didn't just pick up where he left off. He understood the significance of the moment, and he gave it the fresh start it deserved. Emily," he prompted gently. "Take you, David." And as she spoke the vows, the words were no longer just promises. They were a testimony. They were imbued with a meaning so much deeper than before. When she promised in sickness and in health, it now included the quiet sickness of a grieving heart. When she promised for better or for worse, it now included the worst of our pain, the beautiful ghost of our past. She wasn't just accepting me. She was accepting my entire history, my loss, my son, and the undying love I would always carry for Sarah. She was promising to be a guardian of that memory, not a replacement for it. When the officiant finally, joyfully, declared us husband and wife, the applause that erupted was thunderous. It wasn't just polite celebration. It was a genuine, heartfelt ovation for the woman who had faced an impossible moment with a courage and compassion that had healed 100 hearts in that garden. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, with Leo walking proudly between us, I knew our family was not born from the act of forgetting, but from the art of remembering. It was a family being built on the profound foundation that love is not a finite resource. It doesn't get divided when a new person enters. It multiplies. The heart can always make room. It can build new wings, new rooms, new gardens, without demolishing the old ones. Sarah gave me the gift of fatherhood and a love that shaped my very soul. Emily gave me the gift of a future and a love that was brave enough to embrace all of me, past and present. Our story is not a simple one of moving on. It is a story of moving forward, carrying the precious, beautiful, and essential pieces of the past with us. And every day, I see Sarah's legacy in Leo's thoughtful eyes, and I feel Emily's boundless love in his easy laughter. Our home is full of light again. It's a different kind of light, a blend of sunshine and starlight, and it is more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. The journey of the human heart is rarely a straight line. It is full of unexpected turns, sudden storms, and quiet, sunlit clearings. But if you are lucky, you find people who will not just walk the path with you, but who will hold your hand when you stumble, and who will lovingly remind you that the ones we have lost are never truly gone. They are not in a chair. They are in the love. If this story touched your heart, we hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear that hope and new chapters can bloom in the most broken of grounds. Remember to cherish every part of your own story, for each one holds a unique and irreplaceable magic. Thank you for listening. Emily's gaze held Leo's, creating an intimate bubble impervious to the 100 pairs of eyes fixed upon them. Her voice, when it emerged, was a quiet stream of pure grace, flowing into the tense silence and washing it clean. "You're right, sweetheart," she began, her tone a perfect balance of tenderness and certainty. "Your mommy should be here. On a day this big, a day about forever, all the people we love the most should be sitting right here with us, watching." The validation in her words was immediate. I saw Leo's small shoulders, which had been tensed with worry, relax. He felt heard, not dismissed. He felt understood. Emily's thumb stroked his shoulder, a small grounding gesture. "And you know what? I believe she is watching. We've talked about this, haven't we? How she is the brightest star in the night sky. Well, on a sunny day like today, she doesn't need to be a star. Today, she is the sunshine itself. She is in the light that's making your hair shine. She is in the warmth you feel on your face. She's even in the sound of the birds singing. She is here, Leo, all around us in everything beautiful." A single perfect tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek, but she never broke her smile. It was a smile of profound sadness and even more profound love. Across the garden, I saw Sarah's parents, Helen and Robert, clutching each other's hands. Helen was weeping openly now, but through her tears she was nodding, a look of overwhelming gratitude aimed at the woman kneeling before her grandson. Emily leaned in closer, as if sharing a universe-altering secret. "But I think I know why there isn't a chair with her name on it," she whispered conspiratorially. "It's because she isn't a guest, Leo. She's not here to just sit and watch. Her job today is much, much bigger than that. She is a part of the U.S. that is happening right now. She is inside your heart, which is the most important seat in the whole world. And that means she's standing right up here with us. She's holding your other hand." Leo instinctively glanced at his free hand, his expression one of pure, childlike wonder. "She is," Emily affirmed with gentle power. "She's helping you be so strong and brave for your daddy. And she's helping me be brave too. So when you see me smiling at your daddy in a minute, that's her smiling with us. When you see our hands join, she's the warmth between them. She's not sitting down there because she's already up here. Her job today is to be the love that we all feel." The clarity of her explanation settled over my son's face like a sunrise. It was a truth he could hold on to, a piece of magic that made sense of his fractured world. He looked from Emily's radiant, tear-streaked face to mine, and then back. He nodded, a slow, solemn gesture of complete acceptance. "She's the love," he repeated, not as a question, but as a newfound fact. "That's right, my love," Emily whispered back, kissing his forehead. Then, with a poise that defied the emotional chaos of the moment, she rose. She took my hand, her grip warm, firm, and alive with a strength that flowed directly into me. She turned to the officiant, her gaze clear. "I'm ready," she said, her voice ringing with a new and unbreakable conviction. "Please continue." The officiant, a man who had seen decades of weddings, looked at her with an expression of pure reverence. He cleared his throat, his own voice thick with emotion. "And so, with all the love that is here with us today," he said, his words a benediction, "let us continue. Emily, please repeat your vows." As she spoke the words for the second time, they were transformed. They were no longer just a script. They were a living testament. "To have and to hold," she said, her eyes locked on mine. And I knew she meant holding all of my past, all of my grief, for better or for worse, she promised. And I felt in my bones that she had just faced the worst and had not flinched. In sickness and in health, she vowed. And I knew she understood that our family would always have the phantom limb of a beautiful, aching loss. And she was choosing to love us, not in spite of it, but because of it. When the time came for the rings, and then the final joyous declaration, the applause that erupted was not mere wedding etiquette. It was a roar of approval, of love, of deep communal respect for the woman who had just taught everyone in attendance a masterclass in grace. Later at the reception, the golden light of the evening bathed the celebration in a soft glow. I saw Emily from across the room. She was holding both of Leo's hands and they were dancing. Not a slow, formal dance, but a silly, spinning, joyous one that made Leo erupt in peals of laughter, a sound that I had so desperately missed. She was not his mother, but she was his joy. She was his future. Then came the moment that truly cemented our new beginning. Helen, Sarah's mother, approached the bride's table. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear, and she moved with a quiet purpose. She placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "Emily," she began, her voice soft but steady. "For years I have prayed for two things. I have prayed that David would find happiness again, and I have prayed that Leo would always be surrounded by love. I thought I was praying for a good woman to come into their lives." She paused, her hand tightening slightly on Emily's shoulder. "I was wrong. I should have just prayed for you." Emily's eyes welled up again. "Helen, what you did at that altar today," Helen continued, her voice breaking just a little, "was the most selfless, beautiful act of love I have ever witnessed. You didn't just marry David. You made our whole, broken family feel whole again. You didn't erase my daughter. You honored her. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, welcome to this family." And she leaned in and embraced Emily, a long, tearful hug that was a transfer of legacy, a blessing given from one matriarch to another. Our first dance was to a simple, quiet song. As I held my wife in my arms, I rested my cheek against her hair. "You know," I whispered, "I thought today was about the two of us." She pulled back just enough to look at me, her blue eyes shining. "It was always about the three of us," she corrected gently, "and maybe even the four of us." I knew then that our family was not born from forgetting, but from the radical act of remembering together. It was a family built on the audacious belief that love does not get divided. It multiplies. The heart is not a vessel with a fixed capacity. It is a muscle that grows stronger and larger with every new love it welcomes. Sarah gave me the gift of a love that shaped my soul, and a son who is the legacy of that love. Emily gave me the gift of a future, a love brave enough to embrace every scar, every ghost, and every memory. Our story is not one of moving on. It is a story of moving forward, carrying the precious, beautiful, essential pieces of our past into a new light. Every day, I see Sarah's spirit in Leo's deep, thoughtful eyes, and I feel Emily's boundless, healing love in his easy, frequent laughter. Our home is full of light again, a blended glow of starlight and sunshine, and it is breathtaking. The path of the human heart is never what we expect. It is a wild, unpredictable landscape of soaring peaks and shadowed valleys. But if you are lucky, truly, profoundly lucky, you will find people who do not just walk the path with you, but who will hold your hand through the darkest parts and lovingly remind you that the ones we've lost are never truly gone. They are not in an empty chair. They are, and always will be, in the love. If this story has resonated with you, we encourage you to share it with anyone who might need a reminder that hope, healing, and new beginnings can grow in the most broken ground. Cherish every part of your own unique story, for each chapter holds a lesson and a reason for gratitude. Thank you for being with us today.